Perfect. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Gary Harbison, the Executive Director of the Missouri Coalition for Oral Health. We're very pleased to welcome you here today. And I wanted to cover just a little bit of background on the coalition real quickly. We are a 501c3 advocacy organization, a nonprofit, and we are dedicated to improving oral health services and access for everyone in the state of Missouri. We raise awareness, engage with community members, advocate for policy change and healthcare system improvements, and we work together to increase health equity. We really should be considered a statewide network. We have members all over the state, including many organizations and individuals with a very broad interest in community oral health. Our mission is to improve oral health with all Missourians by advocating for sound public policy. And our vision is oral health for all Missourians. You can find us online at our website. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, so you can get a lot of information about us. And I wanted to point out that we do have another webinar of interest coming up, Impact of Technology on Aging America's Oral Health. You can see down there at the bottom of your screen. You can find information on that and other educational and opportunities, including webinars, on our website. Generally on the main page, if you just scroll down a little bit, you'll find a link to all those kinds of things. So we're very pleased to be co-hosting this with Access Teledentistry, and I want to make sure to note that the Missouri Developmental Disabilities Council is providing funding in part for this webinar today, and actually a fairly huge project to increase access to care for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. But I'm going to turn it over to Tiffany Grant with Access Teledentistry. Tiffany is the Chief Executive Officer with that great organization. We're very pleased to have Tiffany and Access Teledentistry in the state of Missouri. So Tiffany, you have the floor.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I am so super excited to introduce our speaker today. His name is GF Fang. He is the co-founder of Kels. Kels is a company that has provided the first AI-enabled remote dental examination for personalized care coordination to patients anywhere without friction of visiting a dental office. Its groundbreaking technology and hybrid service model is transforming dental care with accessible early detection and prevention, especially in the demographic that we're going to talk about today. He received his PhD in computer science from Columbia University. He is knowledgeable in active technology and active in technology in the healthcare space. He's passionate about creating intelligent and highly friendly systems processes to improve people's health and life. And he serves as an advisor to many companies. And his resume is way more extensive, but I'm so happy for him to talk about this exciting topic. And I'm gonna turn it over to him. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Tiffany, for the nice introduction, and thank you for having me here. It's really a pleasure. Let me share my screen and make sure everyone can see it. I hope it works, right? All right. Yeah, really, it's a great pleasure to be here. I saw people are actually from different parts of the country. It's a privilege to share some of the thoughts we have regarding teledentistry and AI, and also hopefully this talk will be educational and also inspiring us to kind of think about adopting innovative solutions to serve the kind of most vulnerable populations, because they deserve really more than what is offering right now. So let's dive into. And I think generally I'm hoping to maybe speak around like 60 minutes or so, and we can have a Q&A. I'm a big fan of interactions with the audience, and I'm really looking forward to hear your thoughts as well and have a discussion together. All right, so the topic today is about supporting homebound patients with teledentistry and AI. Make sure I can, okay, cool. So this is a simple agenda. So I want to start by just mentioning what the problem is and what kind of unique challenges these demographics are facing. And I will talk about some fundamentals about teledentistry, fundamentals about artificial intelligence, and then we're diving into a couple of applications that has been used in teledentistry, leveraging AI, and how these two kind of new technology kind of combine to provide better outcomes and increasing impact. And then I will share a small case study from us actually applying these technology and the services that are enabled by the technology to serve homebound patients in New York City with our partners. Lastly, I want to touch on a couple exciting opportunities, to my opinion, would be pretty significant in the years to come for the industry for how dentists practice, how patients look at dental care on the population level. So homebound patients are really a special demographic, right? So you probably have seen in the recent years with healthcare moving to value-based care and really focusing on the highest risk patients in the population, and the more home care start to booming and kind of position their values into how can they serve this particular population. And generally, when we see homebound patients, they are populations who are unable to access traditional services, and they're among the highest risk populations. And usually they have very complicated medical conditions as well. And they unfortunately will bring highest healthcare costs for that reason. And there's some interesting data points I pulled from the web. The top 1% people with the highest spending actually cost 21% of the overall kind of a healthcare cost, and the top 5 takes half of that cost. So I think homebound is undoubtedly part of that population. So it's very critical and very important for providers, for payers, for the whole ecosystem to think out of the box and think better on how we can bring the best value to them. So let's look at some unique challenges homebound patients are facing today when they access dental care. First, they lack transportation, right? Homebound patients usually do not have easy way to access the traditional kind of a transportation methods. Some of them are wheelchair bound, some of them are bed bound. So it's very difficult for them to go to a brick and mortar. And that links to the second challenge is limited mobilities. They may have, physical disability. They may have other challenges that make them really difficult to move. And, at home, they also have, aid to support the regular life. So for them to go out, it's a very kind of a friction process. And third, financial constraints. This is not just applying to homebound. Obviously, I think it's a much larger problem, a challenge for many people accessing dental care, but for homebound patients, particularly challenging, given that some of them are also low income, some of them in the different kind of financial situations. And the provider today there are very few providers, I would say, right, would be able to kind of serve these populations at home, given the existing, payment and the cost structure. And lastly, when you look at their kind of a developmental and intellectual challenges, many of the patients at home are hard to communicate with. They probably cannot follow commands. They don't understand what to do. So even simple things like taking x-ray, taking photos, it may not be possible for some of the patients. So given all these challenges, it's not hard to understand and not hard to kind of imagine that the utilization for dental care are very low, right? And much lower than maybe the average patients or the non-homebound patients. In fact, based on some statistics, it's as low as 13%. And without having access to the regular dental visit, the routine dental checkup, not to even mention doing treatments or interventions, it poses significant risk on these populations who are already suffering from many complications. And in particular, there are several negative consequences for this lack of access. First of all, they're going to develop tooth decay like everyone else, but maybe even in the more kind of a severe and the faster speed, which can lead to all kinds of conditions, cavities, gum disease, and tooth loss. And a lot of them, as we observe on the field, already lost most of their teeth, if not all. And second of all, oral infections, right? So when they're having, disease in the mouth, it would transfer to other parts of the body, which can cause higher inflammation. If they have chronic disease, it could even worsen their current condition. And the same thing with overall health. I think long time the industry has been kind of separating the dental and medical as the two different subjects. And when you go to a dental office, you're the dentist will actually look at your medical conditions. And in this case, any negative impact on the mouth would go into other parts of the body. If they already have chronic conditions like heart disease or diabetes, it's not gonna bring more benefits to them in this case. So this is where I think, looking at the current way of access dental care, we know there's a limitation for it. This is where teledentistry comes in, right? Teledentistry is a form of telemedicine that focuses on providing dental care remotely and virtually. It's much easier and much more convenient for patients from anywhere with internet access to gain expertise on dental care and without feeling uncomfortable or without feeling all the frictions to physically travel and move to a different office scenario. So there are a couple benefits that I think it's worth kind of mentioning when it comes to teledentistry, both for the patients and also for the providers at some point. First of all, it allows the providers to increase access, increase their service to the patients, particularly homebound patients. So for the reason I already mentioned. Second of all, because they don't have to travel to a physical location, because it doesn't have to take the chair time and other things for the initial kind of activities, teledentistry can actually reduce a lot of costs that traditional brick and mortar will have with a patient in the office. And third, it's more convenient, right? Without saying, you can press a button, you can book a time, and it's all working centered around the patients. And whenever they're comfortable in the environment they're familiar with, they can get expertise from a dentist, maybe from the other parts of the country, right? To really understand what they're encountering. So teledentistry, with all these benefits, has been leveraged in the industry, right? It's not necessarily a new type of technology per se, but it certainly it certainly get accelerated during the pandemic, during the kind of a near time serving for these vulnerable populations. And it's great to see the industry also to acknowledge it from the payer, from the providers. So there are typically a couple ways to leverage teledentistry, and you might already familiar with some of that. I mean, you might have already experienced it yourself. The first way we call it synchronized, which is also called real time. This is sort of like the more specialized video communication, video chatting between the patient and dentist, that the patient will ask some questions or describe their symptom, and the dentist will give their opinions, or they can look at some parts of their mouth and identify anything that's suspicious. And there's a CDD code also exists for that. The second model is called asynchronous, also store and forward. And on contrast with the synchronized way, asynchronous simply means it's not a real-time communication, but it allows much more flexibility to transfer data records about the patient to the providers in the different, in the asynchronous way, so that the providers can be more flexibly arrange their time to examine the patient. And also there's a code for it too. And I'll talk a little bit about the billing later. And the third component or third modality is called remote patient monitoring. This category is actually, could be a mix of both synchronous and asynchronous in some ways. Generally, it means the use of technology to collect and transmit data to monitor a patient's health from a distance. So you can think of example, a smart toothbrush that monitors your, oral hygiene or a behavior like cleaning behavior. Particularly, I think the most widely used applications are orthodontics that monitoring your tooth alignments over time when they're doing orthodontic treatments. So it's a very powerful communication channel, and the way to look at it is in itself, it's a delivery channel, right? It's not a service by itself. It usually combines with the actual service that you're delivering. For example, limited exam, X-rays, intraoral photos that allow you to perform certain services. And this is why not all the payers will actually pay for the codes, but you can definitely combine them when you submit the claim to illustrate how the service is rendered. So, Access Teledentistry has a very good reference document. I put the link here. You can see much more in-depth kind of introduction and case studies, scenarios that how these different modalities are being used for the patients and the dentist. Now, before I go to that, so it all sounds great, right? So it provides an alternative way to touch the patients. It provides a different way for the providers and patient to connect, but it could be better, right? Especially when you think about the synchronous, you would require the dentist to actually also be available at any time the patient requests, or you need someone to review these documents, and different from physically touching the patients, the data collected could be inoptimal, right? Not optimal way. Like the quality may be lower, or for some reason their information is missing. So as we think about what kind of technology can go along with teledentistry, I think AI is a pretty obvious choice. So I want to kind of dive into artificial intelligence on the higher level, in case you're not familiar with. But artificial intelligence is a branch of computer science that focuses on creating machines that kind of mimics how human will think, how human will behave on the intellectual level. And it's a system that's designed to learn constantly from past experience, past data, so that they can adapt to different kind of scenarios or new problems that we human want the machine to behave and to support, right? So most of the use cases for AI is to provide decision support and the clinical kind of assistance. And So one kind of I always kind of like to think of AI as a prediction machine, right? So on the essence of it, it's really just predicting things. So without getting to the technical kind of details, um, as an end user, sometimes I hate to say it, but you would look at it as a black box, which would take something as input and spit out something as output, right? And using this kind of logic, you can try to understand the different subjects of AI, right? The first one called the computer vision is basically to use AI to analyze images, videos, and other visual information to understand what's going on, what are the key information there, right? So you can give a image of cats and dogs. That's the simplest example, and then you tell the machine like, what do you see there? And it can tell you like, it's a cat or it's a dog or both. And to get more complicated, it could be telling you where it is in the image, right? How big it is, and how much pixels it contains. So it can get very sophisticated and very accurate. And it's actually one of the most widely used technology in medical imaging as well. The second kind of applications, the I would say subject of AI is natural language processing. This is what, basically you give a set of a text and you ask the machine to extract key information. For example, ask them to summarize a paragraph, extract all the names of the people, translating different languages, right? It's all fall under NLP. So using the same analogy, input output, you basically give input as a string of text and ask the machine to produce another string of text as output. Now, obviously, there are so much hype right now when it comes to generative AI. And if you look at generative AI, it does apply to both the computer vision subject, also NLP, right? Because it can generate text and it can generate images. But the same philosophy applies. It's basically just a bunch of input signals, and it's what we call right now prompt. And then the machine will take that prompt and generate kind of a bunch of text or images to respond to that. And to entertain you even more, like the kind of a mechanism of generative AI is really to generate the next word given all the words has been shown before, right? So the recent success with ChatGPT and others fall under the fact that they can take a much larger database, actually the whole internet archive, as training data, so the machine can make connections between all these different words and strings to sort of like a mimic, right? Again, mimic how human would write things, how human would think about things. So I think there's a lot of potential in generative AI, but it's important to recognize other subjects. So now we think about how do we use AI in dentistry, right? So obviously, the application can be limitless, really. I think, you probably have already heard a lot of these successful application today. Depends on, I think, based on what kind of data modalities the providers are touching and are used to describe the patient conditions, these technology will fit into each of these applications naturally. For example, computer-aided diagnoses. Given that we all use X-rays, we all use photos to identify lesions and identify risks, we can use AI to read the X-rays for us, right? To surface kind of suspicious areas like cavities, periodontal disease, and other, cracked tooth, all these different conditions by teaching the machine what it looks like from a ton of like historical records. And it brings the benefit of reduced time for you to manually look at each of images to identify a subtle changes, subtle kind of a shades of gray that feels, that feels like uncertain. But the machine are very good at doing that job. And moving forward, the AI can also help us to do treatment planning, right? it actually can look at both 2D and 3D data to measure, where to put the implant, how to align, the corrective tools, and in different ways to simulate what the outcome may look like even before you actually do something, right? And oftentimes it could be highly personalized based on the knowledge of the patient with their lifestyle, their behavior, their medical history, dental history, and even their cost preference. You could come up with something really specific for the patient. And lastly, I think, also very interesting to see on the physical side, there are robotic arms that can perform certain procedures in the dentistry, like implant, or not necessarily implant, but fillings and other simpler kind of procedures in a very highly accurate way. And this technology has been adopted in many areas in the world, actually, to kind of substitute part of the work that the dentist has to do in the office. So with all that being said, obviously we're passionate about AI. We're very encouraged with success in AI, but I think it's important to understand AI is ultimately a tool to enable greater capability of humans, right? In every other domain is the same way. And especially in healthcare, especially in dentistry, I don't see a future that the providers will be replaced. I think the good mindset is to think about AI as augmentation, as a superpower that you can use it to make your job easier and better, right? So I think with other technology, like even teledentistry itself, I think if we can embrace it, if we can approach it in the right way, and work with the technology, we would get the best outcome out of it. So I just want to quickly mention how AI systems are typically trained. As you all know, the technology itself is actually quite mature. So it's also democratized, right? There's open source ecosystem that if you know how to code, you probably can build your own model. But I think the challenge and the nuance is in the data side, right? So there's a saying called garbage in, garbage out. The model can only learn based on what data are feed into it. So this is a typical workflow. You start by collecting some data based on the problem you're trying to solve. Again, input, output, right? You create these examples, sort of like teaching your kids, but you would create even larger volume to teach the machine. And these data are pre-processed, cleaned up, remove any inaccurate metadata and stuff like that, so that make sure it's consistent, it's accurate before they feed into the machine. And then you go to this kind of a model training process. This is where the existing technology really mature. Even ChatGPT, you can have the same type of model training technique available to you from open source and other availabilities. Then you can kind of applying that data set you collected to this process. And lastly, you want to know how well the model performs. You're going to go through this process called evaluation. Evaluation is a blind test that you would create a test benchmark and ask the machine to kind of predict, right? What do you see from these records compared to maybe the human expert's opinion? So this is a quite complicated process, even though here you can kind of feel like, oh, it's very intuitive, like 1, 2, 3, 4. But in reality, you're going to constantly repeat this process and constantly monitoring the results until the systems start to perform to your quality bar. So the reason I want to mention this process is that being a AI producer ourselves, and many other companies in the space, it's important to recognize the safety and the responsibility of AI that we're generating today. That's going to impact patient outcomes and how provider will use it, right? So data privacy, security, responsibilities are essential considerations when developing AI systems. And when you're transferring data through the internet, you have to make sure it's not only HIPAA compliant, but it's also highly secure under the industry standards, so that there's a less risk for people to hack into these databases, these web channels to steal information from your patient, from even like large companies have those risks all the time. And I think the more kind of a concerning part in the industry today when it comes to AI in healthcare in general is the bias and the responsibility for it, right? Because, again, it only learns based on the data you gave. So imagine you only gave data for a very particular population, let's say 20 to 30, male in certain geographic location, and then you want to use the model to predict and analyze for patients that in the very different cohort, you're not going to trust the results for it, right? Because it's a very different, everyone's different. The AI will have a challenge to generalize beyond what it has seen. With technology getting more mature and advanced every single day, this can become, like released in some way that maybe you can train the model to generalize and understand better. But still, I would urge that if you're being part of this creation process, it's very important to look at the population altogether and see if there's any significant gap in that data collection process that could pose risk or misdiagnosis or any other situations for your potential patients. So with the fundamentals of teledentistry and AI, I want to put them together and use Kels, our company, as an example how we approach these two technologies, how we see innovation can overlap that create greater values, right? So AI-driven teledentistry solutions could help reduce costs, improve accuracy, and most importantly, increase access to dental care. When it comes, right now we have seen there's challenges like shortage of provider availabilities, the cost, the kind of a time sensitivities, all these I think could benefit from having a solution like this. So I'm gonna give a few examples that how we're applying these technologies, we're developing these technologies together. So the first example is AI-driven remote assessment diagnosis tool. So we can use it for screening as well. It's a set of AI algorithms that automatically screen and it reads x-rays and photos to identify lesion areas like cavities, bone loss, infections, even defective restorations. And from this example, this is the interface of the system we have developed internally. With the raw x-ray put into the system and a few seconds analysis, it would pop up these areas in kind of a different color coding, indicating this is potentially a cavity areas or some other conditions. And it will also tell you how severe this cavity is, whether it's initial, moderate, advanced, based on the data you have trained on. And this helped dramatically to reduce the time that you have to look through each of these images and consolidate all the knowledge you have identified, right? And it automatically creates this type of documentation on the left side for each tooth. So you can come in, basically simply review all the results. You can reject, accept, and or add in missing areas to complete that documentation. And I will tell you, typically, this whole process could take 5 to 7 minutes for a whole FMX with full annotations and documentation available right there. And I think also what's interesting is, especially for like initial lesions, those are not typically the areas that the dentist will be particularly focused on, right? For the reason that it's more early stage, there's not much of a work you're going to do. So I think the AI can also supplement that. It would probably, particularly to look for these early signals and to detect them more accurately to alert both the dentist and the patient that there's something you need to kind of monitor or consider to see how it changes over time. And the second application we have developed is a standardized patient records. And we call it a patient report, but it really is a interactive experience that we can deliver to the patient for them to understand their dental conditions today and even tomorrow in a predictive way, right? So for example, we can show a high level snapshot of their risk in cavities or bone loss or other areas of the aspects of their mouth, and kind of indicate the urgency of doing something right away, or something you need to monitor. And based on these X-rays and the data, it's a quite evidence driven process that everything is very transparent. Imagine the patient has this report, they're able to dive into it and look at all these annotated boxes, understand where the lesions are, how many are there, what kind of things they need to do. And also they can use a very kind of a engaging experience. We use a very engaging kind of interactive experience. They can explore their mouth by touching each tooth to understand what is going on there and what is recommended to do. And the other parts is the dentist notes, right? Again, dentists always in control of this process, but instead of them having to do all the legwork, it could just be it could just be a very automated process. When they come in, most of the stuff has already been done, and the notes is a place for them to actually chime in with any personal preference, any message they want to share with the patients. And this is also an interesting area for generative AI, right? Because you could actually use a lot of historical records to train the machine to generate these notes for you before you even come in and do some kind of annotations and reviews. So I think having a records like this and this patient centric can dramatically improve patient education and engagement. And what that lead to is a higher treatment acceptance, and also conversion and activation of patients who are traditionally not interested or not aware of how important their oral health is, but really can open the door to them and create these relationships. In fact, in our study, in our experience, touching hundreds of patients, we're seeing up to 70% of care conversion after the initial screening, and with the report to empower them to take actions. The third part is a population health analytics. When you think about homebound patients, when you think about patients in the public domain, the communities, we're really talking about populations, right? How can we create a solution to level up people at scale? And traditional way, you would look at one person in the vertical, right? You would go in depth and figure out all the different aspects of it. With AI, with data, with teledentistry, you can do this all virtually through kind of collecting records and discover insights from it, right? So here this is a kind of a mock-up, but it shows some of the ideas that we have implemented in the real system, that you can have a very bird's eye view of their demographics, their locations, even their social determinants of health elements, their income level, and their ethnicities, to understand like how risks are being distributed across these different cohorts, right? What particular demographic are suffering more from a particular conditions, and this allows us to triage patients and prioritize the most kind of urgent kind of actions or urgent treatments that we have to apply to certain type of patients. Instead of treating them one after another, you actually can allocate resources much more optimally. And when you're thinking about how to for the system overall, like CMS and all the state government, they're thinking about reducing the cost of health all the time. And without information, there's nothing you can improve, right? You can measure it, you cannot improve it. So with analytics like that, it would actually pinpoint, areas that you could intervene much faster, much earlier to reduce potential costs coming from complicated procedures. And the best part of it, you can actually show it in the real evidence and real data to derive the ROI from there. So with all that tools and the applications we have developed, we actually apply them to the real world. We actually apply them to the homebound patients in New York City, in the partnership with some insurance companies we're working with. So I want to show you kind of quickly a case study on that. So this is delivered through home visits to hundreds of homebound patients in the New York City area, particularly the 4 boroughs. The way we do it is approach it as an end-to-end solutions, right? The tools are tools, and the tools are not going to be working without the provider. So we enable mobile providers, in particular hygienists, to leverage the tool to visit the patient where they are. So the first step we did is to identify population of interest. This can come from the claim data, this can come from public data, or other just persona modeling to come up with certain number of people that are likely to have high risk of oral disease or haven't been to the dentist for so long. And the step 2 is to schedule and dispatch the mobile providers with the tools we have equipped them to the locations. And I have to give a lot of shout out to the team at CalStat and everyone else actually doing this work today. This is not easy job, right? Going to people's home, figuring out these logistics, not easy. So they're critically important in this ecosystem. The third step is to conduct in-home dental exam and to coordinate follow-up care, right? So with we have portable x-rays, we have portable cameras, we can easily capture these data. And then with the solution we mentioned before with Teledentistry and AI, the dentist does not have to be in the place in real time, but they can review all the results using AI to speed up, to improve accuracy and the surfacing many different data points about the risk of the patient. And then we don't stop there, right? We would have to coordinate if they need something urgent or they need certain type of treatments to follow up, we can do that too. And with the education we give to the patient and their family members, we have seen a very high engagement for people to seeking care or just kind of work with the plans to figure out, where to go. And the step 4, once you have enough kind of a patient base and the data, we can create an analytics dashboard as mentioned before, and the surfacing critical population insights to not only help understand the quality of the care, but also understand what opportunities are there to serve the patients earlier and more timely to reduce unnecessary costs down the road. So the results are very encouraging from just a few months of deployment of the service in the field. First we got very high NPS score and the patient satisfaction ratings. And this is, to us, probably, if not the most, one of the most elements and metric we look at, because this is a patient-centered solution. If the patient doesn't feel valuable to them, then we're not doing our job well. We have conducted totally 200 visits, and the number is increasing every single day as we speak. The average time that the patients, the population we visited, haven't been to a dentist for over 18 months, right? So you can imagine, there are a lot of problems we can surface in there. In fact, 60% of these population, these people we visited, have advanced conditions that they either have no idea or they're not dealing with it timely. And we're able to convert 80% of these patient group to a follow-up care, working closely with our partners in the plans. And AI, teledentistry, all the technology that happening, I always look at it as the glass half full instead of half empty. It's very optimistic to me that the future of a new way of doing dental care is here today, and to bring improved access and care to homebound patients and really everyone else, right? It's not an application just limited by the homebound, but you can deploy to communities, you can deploy to schools, you can deploy to any places to really, timely identify risk and do the right thing at the right time. And lastly, I want to kind of expand a little bit and hopefully as an inspiration to kind of show a couple aspects that I personally very, very excited about of the future of AI and the dental care. The first area is early detection. As we speak, traditionally we always look at the conditions and look at dental care as a reactive kind of a procedure, right? Like when you have something happening, we're going to treat you. But if somehow we can know like these type of things are going to happen in the next 6 months or 12 months, we can actively approach it, right? People don't have to suffer. They don't have to go through a complicated process. We can apply simple, preventative care, preventive procedures to avoid that or reduce the risk at least. Second part is the measurable outcomes, right? Oftentimes the industry has been perceived as a subjective process. You take, they always, this is where people sometimes have uncertainty about going to the office or seeing one dentist, they have to go to another dentist because it's not very kind of a scientifically presented. With technology like AI, with the data support, we could measure the outcome in a much more objective way. And better than that, we can even chronologically measure how the conditions are being changed, right? Is the patient coming next year, or is it improving, or is it actually decreasing based on a very well-defined formula to compare? And third is dental medical integration. Again, dental medical are supposed to be together, and there are many studies have shown, your oral health has a close relationship with the whole body. In fact, if you have periodontal disease, you would have a higher risk of chronic conditions like diabetes and hypertension. So by separating them is not going to be sustainable, right? And I think, with technology like this, again, improving access, you could apply dental assessment in areas that are traditionally not available, like in the primary care offices, in hospitals, in schools, in other places, that you can look at the patient as a whole. And lastly, value-based care. This is a kind of a hot topic, but really, I think what it's going to be, drawing inspiration, learnings from what's been done in the medical, is going to be more focused on the risk. And the risk is the foundation to estimate the cost and the procedures that's going to happen for a certain population and what kind of service is needed from the providers. So the financial, the payment model could be more aligned with the outcomes instead of the particular work you're doing, right? So I think there's a long way to go, to be honest. I think value-based care is only getting more tractions recently in the medical side, but I think dental care is still on the very early stage, but we can approach it with a better kind of outcome-based mentality based on prevention. And also now we can use technology like AI and others to keep tracking of it and to measure it. So with those infrastructure in place, there's a high probability we could go to a different way of practicing dentistry that's much more scientific, that's much more aligned with what the patients wants, and while reducing costs that are sometimes, most of the time, unnecessary. That's about it. I appreciate your attention. Thank you for joining this talk, and we can probably do some Q&A in case you have questions.
Hi, I do have some questions for you. If it's okay if I can start off with a couple questions for the Q&A.
Please.
Okay. So a lot of times when our firm is teaching people about teledentistry, one of the biggest concerns are about some of the ethical considerations like patient privacy, um, potential biases in AI algorithms. Can you speak on your opinion regarding some of the ethical challenges regarding using AI?
Yeah, no, great question. I think it's a very fundamental challenges in the industry, given that the data are almost always in the silos, right? So every office is a database, particularly, and when you look at how these systems are built, usually they are collected from small sample of that data pool, and then they would apply that tool to real patients, even without extensive set of benchmarking and the tests. So that inevitably creates bias. And to be fair, it's a common problem for AI in general, for other industry as well. So the way to mitigate that and maybe to, kind of be more open and collaborative is to create some kind of industry-wide buy-in from payers and the providers to educate the system that, we have to create, let's say, a valuation that can be applied to all these systems. So we can compare apples to apples, right? So, I would probably, even approach the state or some other way to start collecting data that covers different type of cohorts. And again, it's easier said than done. I think, when we approach practices, sometimes it's very hard to convince them there's a value in the data they're not using for the greater goods. So I think from a policy point of view, right, working with ADA, working with other agencies to understand the importance of openness, maybe there could be an open kind of a data set we can create all together that everyone can contribute to and being used by different, departments, to create a better AI. When it comes to privacy, I think, obviously, we need to consent with the patient. We need to tell the patients how the data will be used. There has been a lot of example in other domains that, people are complaining, consumers are complaining their data being used by the giant IT companies that, just for their commercial benefits, but they're not getting anything out of it, or they just not know, right? So I think it's the same thing in dentistry and in healthcare in general. If we're using their data for certain purposes, we at least should have them know, and if without any incentive to get them involved more actively. But again, I'm very optimistic that by collaboration across the board, we can make these things happen, and I think it's inevitable, right? If you don't address them, you're going to see the pinpoints, the challenges coming back at some point. So it's only a matter of time.
Thank you for answering that. I have another question for you. What strategies can be implemented to overcome some of the technology barriers that homebound patients or patients with disability may have to ensure that they can benefit from AI-driven advancements in dental care? Yeah, that's my question. Sorry.
Yeah, another great question, Tiffany. It's so real because, for example, a lot of these patients we service, they don't even use email, right? So after the evaluation, we're trying to send our report to them, but they have no way to receive it. And I think, they need more help. Maybe they need a assistant and they need caregivers to help on the side to navigate these different kind of tools. At the same time, I think involving family members to kind of look at this all together to kind of communicate and understand is important. This is not just a problem for the patient themselves, but also the people around them that care about them. But I do think the technology alone has opportunity to even more simplify the process, right? For example, I think the voice interface are not being leveraged enough to simplify the interaction between the human and the machine, right? So I think with ChatGPT and other more natural kind of a large language models technology, we can approach to a reality that people are not going to feel they're talking to a code machine, but they actually could communicate and surfacing their concerns. I think there's a lot of potential there. In dental care, it's the same way. I think there's an application I didn't talk about. It could just be a kind of virtual assistant you can ask questions about, right? So a homebound patient, if they have a tooth pain or some other things, they could talk to an interface and maybe get someone to take notice or triage them even before they need to kind of call someone or type something out, right? So I think there's a space to kind of interestingly to make it more streamlined.
And my last question before we open it up to the attendees. So for an attendee that is here, that is a provider, what is the way that they can effectively leverage AI and technologies into their everyday to day? If they wanted to go home tomorrow, go to work on Monday and figure out a way to leverage AI to make their practice more efficiently and optimize treatment planning, what would you recommend for them?
I think it's a tool that built to serve providers, right? So by design, it should be pretty easy to adopt. So I think from the provider point of view, making sure that you're keeping your records clean and ready in the PMS today is important because when you're deploying AI, it has ability to also to look at all past histories, right? So if you don't have any records, there's more work to do, obviously, for the system. But I think making sure that your images are captured correctly, in a good quality, and be a bit more kind of data driven, I would say, right? Change your mindset to start looking at these data as assets, not just images. I think be open minded about integrating new technology. Try it out. I would say this, right? It's like early on, my partner always say like when Zappos were selling shoes online, like nobody think it's a thing, but now everyone doing that. I think initially, as any technology, there's a tendency to be scared about or suspicious about. I would say, maybe just find a way to test it yourself and be actively engaging with it, right? Kind of if you're part of the puzzle, actually creating the future, and your feedback are important. You can influence how the system is built for tomorrow. So I think this kind of interaction is very important, but also definitely, kind of educate yourself, right? For example, go see some like existing systems, how they're being used, and maybe get opinion from their peers are also very, very helpful for them to adapt to that new trend.
All right. Are there other questions? There is a comment about in chat. This would be great for a VA vets in rural areas away from VA medical centers. I certainly agree with that. I don't know if you have any particular comments about that type of usage.
Absolutely. I think we are actually approached by many potential partners, and they're thinking about VA. They're thinking about rural areas. To me, I think it's a tool that it's really a tool to kick off the process of dental experience. And for rural areas today, you're going to send a mobile van there, right? Most likely you're going to send a mobile van, you're going to get people together and then touch them one after another. I think but one potential way is to leverage AI and the fast screening capability to survey a population, a area, that before you even send a van, you can have, a small team of hygienists or assistant go there, collect the data, and use tools like this to analyze their risk profile, and then do all the kind of a planning ahead, right? Which not only reduce your cost and improve your capacity, but also I think it's a better way to understand the population and kind of decide, better planning, basically how to approach these different needs.
I have one more question. So if someone was interested in using KELS, how would they contact you? How would they reach you? What would be that process?
So we're currently not actually providing it to outside. We are working with a few partners as a pilot projects. So definitely welcome outreach to us and understand more. The easy way I would just put here could be just our website. There are forms you can submit to tell us that you're interested to learn more, or you can just contact me directly through my email. I think we're very welcoming collaborations, any type of collaborations. It's a big belief in the company that we cannot change the industry by ourselves. No one can do that alone. So definitely, if there's interest in talk more, please contact us.
We have a question.
Yeah, what dental team member do you see as being utilized most often in teledentistry and AI as the person on site who collects the assessment data?
Actually, I didn't ask that question, just FYI.
Yeah, great question. Great question. From our point of view, we believe hygienists are very important workforces. And actually, assistants sometimes too, also therapists, but hygienists are really at the center of it. They're not only knowledgeable, they're not only patient empathetic, they're very capable, very capable. We love working with hygienists, and I think, they just need a little bit of support, right? Sometimes they need a bit of empowerment to do more. I believe, here's my complaint. I hate to say it, that the requirements, the direct access for hygienists are not universally open for every state, right? So some states have particular bottleneck, like you cannot do that, you cannot do that. But if you look at the scope of the service, it's actually reasonable, but I do understand the concern potentially. So I'm hoping that, with more conversation and the more technology support, hygienists and similar type of providers can be more empowered to do more to impact the patient population. Because honestly, without them, there's no access, right? I think the ratio between the number of dentists and the population to be served are ridiculously far away. So you can't even train a dentist fast enough, right? So I think the reason these tools exist is to level up people, level up providers to do more and the better. Not necessarily harder, but better, right?
Well, we do have teledentistry in Missouri. It's been allowed since 2016. Coalition's heavily supportive of the use of teledentistry. I think the addition of AI is something that would increase the efficiency that I think teledentistry always brings to the oral healthcare system. So very much appreciate your comments. And no, Tiffany did not plant that message. I can attest to that. Any other questions or comments? This is a great discussion. Anybody want to make any flamboyant remarks? Well, final call for questions. I did put in the chat that there will be a recording of this available a little bit later on the coalition website. I think Access Teledentistry, you may make this available on your website as well.
Yeah.
And we'll also have a copy of the slides out there for you. So give us a little bit to process the recording and get it posted. Valerie made a comment. I appreciate the augment versus replace. Sure, of course. Any other questions or comments? All right, well, seeing none, we're getting some thank yous for the presentation. I certainly want to thank you. Excellent presentation. I would really call it kind of groundbreaking from my perspective. So really glad to have you here, and thank you so much to both of you for being here and doing this, and to everyone for attending. And if there are no other last second questions, we'll let you all have some of your time back for the day. It's been good to have everyone on here today. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate everyone being here and our incredible speaker. And hopefully the coalition could reach out to him again to do some more, because I think this is so important, leveraging technology to really create access. Like that superpower that he said, it's such an important piece to the puzzle, especially for policymaking and for people in the public health arena to understand how we can leverage that to have better outcomes. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I very much appreciate those comments. I think, this is very different and very new. And it was not so long ago, the teledentistry in the state was very different and very new. There are a number of providers that use it now. It is still mostly FQHCs, but there are private practices using that. And I think there's always a little anxiety with something new, but the reality is this state, because of the pandemic and some overall trends, has a tremendous challenge, particularly in rural areas of providing services. So things that we can do to increase the efficiency so that access can be ramped up. We do need to be talking about that, and I think people can get over the anxiety that this can generate, of course. And we can, forget it when we talk about AI. We can forget about the Terminator movies. It's probably not going to happen. So we've been anxious about new technology since I think Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein, but we're really in control of this stuff and can make these tools work for us in an efficient and sophisticated manner. So. All right. Well, thank you very much, and we'll let everyone go. Take care.
Thank you very much.